My name is Emily Carter. I'm 27 years old, and I grew up in New Jersey, USA. I live in a quiet suburb near Philadelphia, but this story takes me back to my childhood, a time filled with confusion, survival, and lessons I learned the hard way. This isn't just about revenge. It's about finding strength when the one person who should protect you turns into your biggest challenge. When I was just 6, my parents divorced. I barely understood what that meant, but overnight, my world split in two. My mom got full custody, and my dad moved out. Mom told us over and over that it was all his fault. If we didn't have food, if the lights went out, or if she was angry, it was always your father's fault. I grew up believing that pain was normal, that guilt was love, and that silence was safety. By the time I turned 8, my childhood had already disappeared. My older sister Lisa was 10 then. We came home from school, dropped our backpacks, and started cleaning. We made dinner, did our homework, and learned not to ask Mom for help. She'd snap, "Do it yourself. I'm tired." So we did. We thought this was normal, that all kids had to act like adults while their mom slept through the afternoon or watched TV with a drink in hand. Mom had her moods, storms that came without warning. One minute, she'd be smiling, the next, screaming that we were worthless. Sometimes she'd hit us. Sometimes she'd cry and say we made her do it. She was unpredictable, but we learned how to keep the peace. I became quiet, careful, always watching her face for clues. My sister and I whispered our dreams to each other at night, promising that one day we'd escape. High school should have been the start of freedom, but it only made things worse. My grandma passed away when I was 17, and Mom inherited around $75,000. For a while, she acted like life was perfect. New clothes, dinners out, and laughter that felt strange. But by summer's end, the money was gone. She quit her job and claimed she needed time to heal. What she really needed was attention. As she stopped working, I started working more. School, part-time job, homework, and taking care of her. It became my life. When bills went unpaid or food ran out, she looked at me and said, "You have a job, don't you? Pay it yourself." I'd remind her that Dad sent child support, but she'd laugh and call it Mommy's paycheck. I learned early on that nothing in her world came without guilt attached. When it came time for college, I chose a state university. Affordable, good reputation, and far enough to breathe. Mom pretended to care, complaining about tuition, but never offering help. She said, "If you want college, figure it out yourself." So I did. I filled out my FAFSA, worked extra shifts, and got grants. For the first time, I felt a tiny spark of freedom until she found a new way to control me. My W-2 tax forms were mailed to our home. Mom shredded them, twice. My sister caught her doing it the first time. The second time, Mom denied everything and blamed her friend, who's a CPA. That lie fell apart fast. Her friend called me directly and helped me redo my taxes so I wouldn't lose my financial aid. I started realizing the truth. My mom wasn't just careless. She was sabotaging me on purpose. The following year, she did it again. Same trick, same lies. My FAFSA was delayed, my aid reduced, and my stress skyrocketed. I remember sitting in my dorm room, holding the rejection letter, feeling numb. My mom wasn't helping me. She was making sure I struggled. But something inside me shifted that day. I stopped crying over her choices and started planning my own. That summer, before my 3rd year, I hit my breaking point. I worked full-time, saving every penny for school, while Mom spent her days online chatting and complaining about her ungrateful daughters. She demanded I pay the phone bill so she could talk to her internet friends. When I refused and got my own cell phone, she called me selfish. The irony didn't even make me angry anymore. It just made me tired. By August, I had saved around $1,000, barely enough for tuition. The university told me I couldn't move into the dorm until I paid half up front, nearly $10,000. I panicked. My mom shrugged and said, "Should have managed your money better." I called my dad for the first time in years, crying. The next morning, he drove hours to my campus, coffee and donut in hand, ready to help. That moment changed everything. Dad walked me through every office, co-signed a loan, and paid the rest himself. Then he told me the truth. Mom had never helped my sister with college either. She'd lied to both of us for years, pocketing the support money and pretending to be broke. I felt anger, sadness, and relief all at once. Finally, someone saw what I'd been living through. After lunch that day, my dad looked me straight in the eye and said, "Emily, I think it's time I handled this differently." He asked for access to my college account and my tuition statements. I hesitated at first. Years of Mom's manipulation had trained me to hide things, but the trust in his voice broke through my fear. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone anymore. Dad spent weeks gathering proof, tuition invoices, payment records, bank statements. He even spoke with my university's financial office to confirm that every payment came from me or him, not Mom. When he called the court to reopen their divorce case, Mom went ballistic. She accused me of betraying her, calling me ungrateful and brainwashed. But I wasn't scared anymore. I was done being her scapegoat. When I told Mom about the court hearing, she screamed so loudly the phone nearly slipped from my hand. "You ruined my life," she shouted. "Do you have any idea what your father's doing to me?" I wanted to remind her of what she'd done to us, but I didn't. Instead, I said calmly, "I'm just doing what you always told me to do, Mom. Complain to Dad." The silence that followed felt like the first breath of peace I'd had in years. A month later, the hearing took place. I didn't attend, but Dad called afterward. He told me the judge saw every receipt, every piece of proof showing Mom hadn't paid a cent toward my education. The court ruled that he could stop paying her child support and instead send that money directly to cover my tuition. For once, justice didn't just exist in movies, it happened in my life. When Mom found out she was losing child support, her fury had no limits. She left me a string of voicemails, crying, yelling, and threatening to cut me off. She even tried to guilt me by saying, "After everything I sacrificed, this is how you repay me?" But I had nothing left to feel guilty for. Her sacrifices were just stories she told to make herself the victim. I had spent my whole life paying the price. For years, I believed she was the one holding the family together. But now I saw clearly, she was the one breaking it apart, piece by piece. My dad, who had been painted as the villain, was the only person truly trying to save us. That realization hurt more than I expected. I cried that night, not for what I lost, but for all the years I spent believing her lies. After the court's decision, Mom tried to make herself look pitiful. She told neighbors that Dad abandoned her and that I turned against her. She played her role well, sad eyes, trembling voice, but the sympathy she used to get started fading. People saw through her stories. She wasn't the struggling mother anymore. She was the woman who refused to take responsibility for anything. She called again before winter break, claiming her electricity had been shut off. "If you want to come home, you better help me pay the bills," she said coldly. I almost laughed. It was such a familiar game. But this time, I had an out. "That's okay, Mom," I said softly. "I'll stay with Dad this Christmas." Her silence was heavy, full of disbelief. For once, I wasn't her hostage anymore. When I told Dad what she'd said, he just shook his head. "She's bluffing," he said. And he was right. Within days, she somehow found the money to get her utilities back on. But I didn't care anymore. That Christmas, I spent my break at Dad's house with my stepmom and younger half-siblings. It was the first holiday in years that didn't feel like walking on eggshells. Dad even offered me a job at his office during winter break. It wasn't glamorous, just simple clerical work. but it felt like freedom. I earned my own money, paid my bills, and didn't have to apologize for it. Every paycheck reminded me that I wasn't trapped anymore. Mom's voice still echoed in my head sometimes, but it grew quieter with every passing day. By spring, everything was official. Dad was in full control of my college expenses. The judge ordered Mom to cooperate with selling the house since she refused to handle the mortgage. She moved her boyfriend in for a while, trying to prove she didn't care. But deep down, I knew losing control over me was her biggest defeat. She no longer had the power to make me feel small. What she didn't realize was that her loss was my rebirth. I wasn't just escaping her control, I was rebuilding myself. For the first time, my life was about me, my goals, my studies, my peace. I wasn't the scared little girl waiting for approval anymore. I was finally free, and the revenge wasn't in what she lost, it was in what I gained. After the court ruling, life felt strangely quiet. I no longer had to check my phone in fear of Mom's angry messages or worry about her next outburst. I focused on college, work, and rebuilding the pieces she had broken. My dad called every week, asking about my classes, my friends, my plans. He never missed a single tuition payment, and for the first time, I could breathe without guilt. Mom, however, wasn't adjusting well. She lost the house when she refused to pay the utilities and ignored every notice from the bank. Her boyfriend stuck around only long enough to realize she had no intention of changing. When he left, she called me crying, saying she had nowhere to go. I listened quietly, remembering every time I begged her for help and she turned away. I didn't hang up on her. I just told her the truth. Mom, I can't fix this for you. There was silence, followed by a deep sigh. Maybe for a moment she realized how much damage she'd done. But that moment passed quickly. She started blaming everyone again. My dad, the bank, even me. The cycle never ended with her. I understood then that I couldn't save someone who didn't want to change. Back at school, I threw myself into my studies. I joined the honors program, volunteered, and worked at the library part-time. My professors noticed how hard I pushed myself, but none of them knew why. Every A, every scholarship, every moment of success felt like reclaiming a piece of my stolen childhood. I was proving to myself that I was more than my past. When summer came, I stayed with Dad instead of going back to New Jersey. He offered me a job in his company's office again. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me stability. My stepmom treated me with kindness, something I wasn't used to. She didn't see me as competition or a burden. She just saw me. For someone raised to feel invisible, that meant everything. Meanwhile, Mom kept moving from place to place. She'd stay with relatives, charm them for a few weeks, and then argue until they asked her to leave. Each time she'd call me with the same story. Everyone turns against me. At first, I felt guilty. Then I realized she wasn't unlucky. She was unaccountable. You can't outrun your own reflection forever. By my final year of college, I stopped answering her calls altogether. I needed peace to finish strong. She left dozens of voicemails, some apologetic, others venomous. But I learned that closure doesn't always come from the other person. Sometimes it's choosing not to reopen the wound. I graduated with honors, my dad cheering loudest in the crowd. Mom wasn't there, but I didn't need her to be. After graduation, Mom tried to reach out again, pretending nothing had happened. She asked if I could move to Tennessee to live with her for a while. I almost laughed. She was still healthy, barely 50, yet talked like she needed a caretaker. I told her I was building my own life and couldn't drop everything to play the role of her savior again. That didn't go over well. She called my sister next, crying that her daughters had abandoned her. My sister and I laughed about it later. We'd both stopped feeling guilty for her self-made misery. Mom's choices had led her exactly where she stood. We didn't hate her, we just refused to keep bleeding for her mistakes. That decision wasn't cruel, it was survival. Eventually, Mom burned every bridge she had. Relatives stopped answering her calls, old friends kept their distance, and she ended up in a shelter. Later, she moved into subsidized housing, a small loft-style apartment she still complains about to this day. The irony never ends. Even when life gave her peace, she chose chaos instead. Some people can't handle quiet when they've lived in noise. As for me, I built a quiet life. I found a job I loved, made new friends, and learned to set boundaries without guilt. I still talk to Mom sometimes, but only when I'm ready. She hasn't changed much, but I have. I've learned that revenge isn't about hurting someone. It's about healing yourself so deeply that their chaos no longer reaches you. Looking back, I realize I didn't destroy my mom's life. I simply stopped being her safety net. I did exactly what she taught me to do, complain to my father. Only this time, it set me free. My revenge wasn't fire or fury, it was success, peace, and a life untouched by her manipulation. That's the kind of revenge no one can ever take away. Life after college felt like waking up from a long, heavy dream. I finally had control over my choices, my time, my peace. I found a small apartment near Philadelphia, close to my job at a publishing firm. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The first night I slept there, surrounded by boxes and silence, I realized I'd built something my mother never could: stability born from struggle. My dad helped me move in, carrying boxes and pretending not to get emotional. When he left, he hugged me tight and said, "I'm proud of you, kiddo. You did this on your own." I knew what he meant. I hadn't just escaped my mother, I'd broken a cycle. I promised myself that I would never use guilt or manipulation to feel loved. My home would be a place of calm, not chaos. At first, independence felt lonely. I'd been surrounded by noise my entire life. Mom's yelling, her moods, the constant tension. Now the silence echoed. I filled it with music, books, and laughter from new friends. Slowly, the quiet became comforting. It wasn't emptiness anymore. It was space to breathe, to heal, and to learn who I truly was beneath all the fear. Mom still tried to contact me. Sometimes she called late at night, her voice soft and broken. "I just wanted to hear your voice," she'd say. Other times, she'd spiral into old habits, blaming, crying, accusing. I learned to recognize the pattern: guilt followed by manipulation. I stopped picking up every call. It hurt at first, but peace often costs distance. There were moments when I almost gave in, when her loneliness tugged at my heart. But then I remembered all the nights I cried myself to sleep because of her anger. Love without respect is just control wearing a disguise. I wanted to help her, but I couldn't sacrifice myself again. Sometimes the hardest part of healing is accepting that not everyone wants to heal with you. Work became my anchor. Editing manuscripts gave me purpose, and every story I helped shape reminded me of how far I'd come. My boss often said I had an old soul, and maybe she was right. Surviving what I did forces you to grow up faster, but it also gave me empathy. I saw people not for who they appeared to be, but for what they endured quietly. My sister, Lisa, visited often. We'd cook dinner, laugh about old memories, and talk about how different life felt now. Sometimes we still flinched at loud noises or harsh words. It's what trauma does. But together, we reminded each other that we weren't children anymore. We were survivors who built our own lives out of the ashes of someone else's storms. Mom's life didn't improve. She kept moving from one unstable situation to another, blaming the world for her pain. Relatives eventually stopped answering her calls. I wished things were different, but wishing doesn't fix broken patterns. One night, I wrote her a letter, not out of anger, but acceptance. I told her I forgave her, even if she never apologized. I mailed it, then let go. Months later, she called to thank me for the letter. Her voice was quiet, uncertain. For the first time, she didn't sound angry, just tired. She said, "Maybe I wasn't a good mother, but I did love you." I believed her, in her own broken way. But love without care is like a flame without warmth. It flickers, but it never truly burns. That call was our closest moment in years. After that call, she faded back into the background of my life. I didn't chase her, I didn't hate her, I just wished her peace. I started therapy, learning how to untangle guilt from love and boundaries from cruelty. Healing wasn't pretty. It was messy, exhausting, and real. But every tear I shed was another piece of her control leaving my soul. Years passed, and I became someone even I didn't recognize. Strong, calm, content. I traveled, made friends, and built a quiet happiness my younger self could only dream of. Mom still lives in her small, subsidized apartment, calling occasionally, usually to complain. But I no longer feel responsible for her moods. That's freedom, the kind that doesn't need revenge to exist. Looking back, I see how far I've come. My revenge wasn't loud or cruel, it was living a life she said I could never have. I turned pain into purpose, chaos into calm. Some stories don't end with applause. They end with quiet strength. Mine did. And if she ever wonders how I found peace, I'll simply say, "I did what you told me to do, Mom." I complained to Dad. It's been years since I last lived under my mother's roof, but her shadow still lingers in small ways. Sometimes when someone raises their voice, my chest tightens. Sometimes when I make a mistake, I hear her words in my head. But the difference now is, I answer back. I remind myself that I'm not her child anymore. I'm an adult who survived her storms and learned how to stand in the sunlight again. Healing isn't about pretending the pain never happened. It's about learning to live without letting it define you. I stopped chasing apologies and started giving myself permission to grow. My therapist once said, "You broke a generational chain." And maybe that's true. I don't yell, I don't manipulate, I don't guilt people into love. I choose peace every single day, even when it's hard. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Mom had chosen healing instead of blame. Maybe we'd spend holidays together, laughing over dinner, sharing recipes instead of resentment. But life doesn't always give us the version we wish for. It gives us lessons, boundaries, and choices. And I've learned that love without limits is just self-destruction disguised as loyalty. My dad once told me, revenge is just pain trying to be seen. At first I didn't understand, but now I do. My revenge wasn't against Mom, it was against the version of myself who believed I wasn't enough. I proved her wrong by becoming everything she said I couldn't be. Educated, kind, independent, and free. That's not revenge anymore. That's victory. Quiet, steady, unstoppable victory. I visit Dad often. He's remarried now, and his wife treats me like family. We sit on the porch, drinking coffee, talking about life and work. Sometimes he brings up the past, but never with bitterness, only pride. He says, "You turned pain into power." I smile every time because he's right. I didn't just survive her, I outgrew her, like sunlight breaking through a window she tried to keep shut. Mom still calls every few months. The conversations are short and polite. She asks about my job, my apartment, sometimes even my happiness. There's a distance between us now, but it's the kind that keeps peace alive. I no longer expect change from her. Some people never become what we need them to be, and that's okay. Acceptance doesn't mean approval, it means freedom. When people hear my story, they often say, "You must hate her." But I don't. I've learned that hate is just another kind of chain. I carry no anger, only understanding. She did the best she could with what she had, even if it wasn't enough. And maybe one day, she'll find peace too. Until then, I'll keep living mine. If you've ever had a parent like mine, a manipulator, a liar, a destroyer of peace, know this: you are not broken. You were just raised in chaos and taught to mistake fear for love. But you can unlearn it. You can choose kindness without being a victim, strength without cruelty. Your story doesn't have to end the way it started. You are allowed to rewrite it. I used to think revenge was about getting even. Now I know it's about getting free. It's the soft smile on your face when you realize they no longer control your emotions. It's the deep breath before bed, knowing your peace is real. My mom taught me many painful lessons, but unintentionally, she taught me the most powerful one: how not to become her. So, if my mom ever listens to this story, I hope she understands. It's not hatred that drives me. It's gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons, the strength, and the chance to build a life she couldn't imagine. I did what she told me to do. I complained to Dad, and that complaint became the spark that saved my life. Every scar tells a story, and mine says this: you can come from pain and still create beauty. You can grow from chaos and still choose calm. You can be the cycle breaker. And one day, when someone asks how you found strength, you'll smile and say, I stopped surviving for others and started living for myself. That's the truest revenge of all.